Hi, this is the SpeakOut campaign, a youth initiative dedicated to promoting public speaking and civic engagement. We interview prominent speech and debate competitors along with various youth voices and activists. Today, we'll be speaking with Patrick Dugan, BRI National Fellow and a state-ranked PF debater on engaging with different political opinions. We'll be discussing how he got started with PF debate and civics, his experience with talking to members of Congress on pressing issues, his thoughts on the recent Republican presidential debate, and how to learn and grow from different political perspectives and discussions. Hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Patrick. Really excited to get to talk to you today. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Not bad, not bad.
Nice.
Um, so for everyone else, Patrick is a debater, of course, and he is ranked fourth in Illinois' Public Forum Debate League, placing third at the 2023 IHSA state competition. He's president of his school's student-led debate team, and Patrick organizes speaking drills and topic lectures for all three competing levels. Outside of debate, Patrick is a national fellow with the Bill of Rights Institute and school president of Citizen Club. Both of these forums have furthered his understanding of civic education and national affairs. Patrick is also an executive board member of the CH Infant Welfare Society, through which he aims to improve access to educational and medical services for marginalized communities in the Chicagoland area. So very, very cool stuff that you're doing there. But to start off, I just want to ask, how exactly did you get interested in politics? Because from just other students that I've met, I feel like that's not necessarily something that people always start out in. So I'm just curious as to whether you always had this interest or if something else sparked it along the way.
Yeah, well, I've always been somewhat of a history nerd, so I feel like there's always an intersection between politics and historical events. And but debate kind of like furthered my interest in nuanced topics rather than these hot topic issues that you see on the news. And what kind of got my involvement in debate was I used to be a theater kid, so I feel like there's always a theater kid to debate runway
Oh,
that people
definitely.
say. And I don't know, I just feel like before I was very interested in the idea of like show business and going on a stage and singing and dancing, and then I kind of took that skill set and applied it to debate with being very vocal about certain issues and stuff, and it's kind of like a mutually reinforcing skill set.
I see.
Yeah.
And I like how you're another theater kid. I feel like, at least in my debate team, they're a little underrepresented. We're always trying to market to them, but I know that, of course, there is definitely a pipeline there, and I think that's
Yes,
amazing that
I
you got
know.
you got like the best of both worlds, right?
I know. I feel like at my school, the pipeline is stronger from theater to speech, so we're always trying to
Oh,
recruit ex-theater kids, but they seem to get them before us.
that's funny. And how would you say you are involved in community issues? Are you more into like working with what's immediately in front of you, or are you more involved with like national politics?
I would say that in terms of community issues, I'm more involved on a charity level and, like kind of mobilizing the community to raise money or books or games for these marginalized communities through the Infant Welfare Society. And then on the national level, that's where I am more involved politically with like lobbying and talking to my congressmen and stuff like that.
Gotcha. And how has PF impacted this? Because, of course, debate is very civics and politics heavy. So, has that impacted you all in what you are interested in trying to lobby for, or anything like that?
Yeah, I think that PF has made me very aware of like issues in terms of like individually as opposed to looking at issues from your political party standpoint. I feel like I'm very skeptical now because I know that not all sources are necessarily reputable and there are always underlying motivations between what you see on the internet. So I feel like I don't know. I have a very nuanced opinion of politics now because I've had to research both sides of different issues for every debate competition that I have. And yeah, and also just the skill set that it provides you with discussing with your representative. I feel like I'm able to connect with people more just because I'm so used to verbalizing my sentiments on different issues on the debate podium.
I definitely feel that, especially the evidence part, because a lot of times I think debate really devolves into evidential debates sometimes, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but I understand that they're necessary sometimes. And it's interesting to see once you understand what is considered like reputable evidence or what is perhaps stuff that's less skewed, then when you're seeing that pop up on the national stage, you're more attuned to that and you can make your own opinions a little better because you're understanding where those facts are coming from, and you also take the effort to actually go investigate things if you don't understand them. So I like how that's something that you've learned and applied. And I also remember from our week in DC that you talked about how opinions at your school are very much divided. And what I found interesting was that you mentioned how they were kind of divided along gender lines. So, can you talk a little bit more about that? Like, why do you think it is the way it is at your school?
Yeah, I think that like many other places, people initially they kind of look to what their parents believe in and just follow that. And I don't know, like what's going on, what's playing in your house on the TV. I think that can always like influence what you how you perceive different political issues. But I think that the gender divide almost with politics at my school is kind of reflects the national climate with different gender-based issues with like the Roe v. Wade overruling. I mean, that kind of affects you based on your gender. It's more obviously prevalent for women. And also with the popular culture of Andrew Tate and conversations like that are very focused on degrading women and like the alpha mentality. I think that can kind of strike a chord with some people and almost like polarize them separately, if that makes sense.
That does.
Yeah.
And I think you bring up a good point there because there's so much stuff that's coming at you in all sorts of directions on social media. Like as soon as you open up anything, I feel like they're just trying to polarize you just from all the things that they're trying to get views from because that's how you rile people up and get them to click on things if you put something that's super out there, very controversial. So I agree with you on how there's a lot of outside factors, and as you said, it's also the people that you surround yourself with. You're obviously going to be influenced by them, and that's not necessarily a good or bad thing. It's just the way things are. So I
Yeah,
think
for
that's
sure.
interesting.
Yeah.
And do you have any thoughts on the recent like Republican Party debate that we saw on TV? Because that has definitely been gaining a lot of attention. So do you have any thoughts on that? Did you watch it at all?
Yeah, I actually okay. I listened to Robbie from the Bill of Rights Institute Student Fellowship. He has a podcast, the Road to 2024 podcast. I listened to his episode on it, and he featured a couple other fellows. So it was really interesting to listen to. I didn't actually watch the debate on TV. I was doing my homework, but it was a really good recap if anybody wants to watch that. And they inserted some clips from the debate too, so there was a lot of diverse opinions, and yeah, I really recommend it. But I feel like you could really recognize the debate kids on the stage with Nikki Haley and Ramaswamy. They kind of pose like a strong presence on the stage because of their aptitude with speaking and their presentation. I don't know if they actually did debate, but it was obvious that like Ron DeSantis did not do high school debate because he didn't really excel in that field. Um, and yeah, I don't know. On one hand, I'm a little bit hopeful just because there was less focus on the culture wars, which I feel like has been in the news a lot. But prior to the debate, with Ron DeSantis, his whole campaign really relying on banning books and kind of targeting American families. And I don't know, it's very polarizing. I feel like there isn't actually these issues. They're just kind of riling up people just to get support and like angry parents, if that makes sense. But at the same time, I was also a little bit concerned because of the differing views on climate change. I feel like that's a really hot topic for youth voters. And I mean, some of the candidates, like I think Nikki Haley made a comment that was recognizing that there needs to be government efforts to alleviate the environmental catastrophes rooted in climate change. But I think with like Ramaswamy, who calls the climate agenda a hoax, I think it's a little bit concerning for the youth voters.
That's interesting, and I think you
Yeah.
summed that up very well because a lot of times we're expected to just take complete opposite sides on these issues when in actuality they affect all of us. And I actually interviewed someone else the other week, and they were talking about how there's a lot of rhetoric that goes into it as well. For instance, framing it as climate change instead of global warming because apparently those actually have two different connotations. So I think it's interesting how when you're up there with these debates, it's also important to think about, hey, like what kind of rhetoric are these people using to kind of push their own agenda? Because it's always important to kind of take a more holistic view. And I agree with you on the idea of like the differences in the speaking styles for the people up there because, yeah, yeah, we can
Yeah.
definitely tell that Vivek was a debate kid. And something really interesting that I found out was that I actually visited his old high school the other week, and I had no idea he even like went there. But I don't know, it
It's so
just
random.
yeah, I know it is really random, and I kind of see like how he has like developed into that person kind of not necessarily because of like the vibes from that school, but I think just of like the surrounding areas and like the curriculum. So he definitely is trying to go like just rallying people up. Like he seemed very much to be trying to like cater to certain people the entire time. So yeah, I mean
Yeah.
that works in debate sometimes. I mean, have you ever felt that way whenever you're competing?
Yes, there's always certain judges that you just already know their like political leanings prior to it, and some judges are like really radical in their beliefs. So we always have like an extra contention to decide if it's like someone that is always prioritizes economic points or someone that always votes on something relating to climate change or something like that. I feel like you kind of have to know who you're speaking to also. I mean, and that's I mean, Ramaswamy, I feel like he was speaking to the what we know as the Republican populace.
Oh, for sure. And
Yeah.
yeah, especially like when you go into a route and you're sometimes just looking at their laptops and seeing what stickers they have, and you can kind of like figure out what they're gonna
Yes,
vote off
yes,
of on based on that. That's funny.
for sure.
Um, and when we were in DC for that week, I know you had the chance to talk to some politicians. So what exactly was that experience like? Who were you able to talk to, and what kind of issues were you bringing up?
Yeah, okay, so in terms of my representatives, my representative is Representative Garcia, and he was out of town, so I spoke to his chief of staff instead. And I kind of asked her about the various policies that he implemented for the Chicagoland area, and I was enlightened on different like infrastructure projects and different like other national bills that he supported that I just didn't really know about at all, and it was really enlightening. And I think that the biggest takeaway I have of this was how humanizing the experience was on one hand, like just talking about my representative's office decor or Representative Moskowitz's sneaker caucus. Like these are real people that you can simply walk up to their door and ask if you can like if they're available and talk to them. But at the same time, I feel like I could recognize when I was talking to like a falsified politician as opposed to someone who has a brain on their shoulders, to put it frankly.
Oh,
Like I really liked how when we talked, were you there when we talked to Representative Moskowitz?
I was not.
Oh, you were? Okay. Well, he basically talked about how he recommends people who are civically engaged and want to get active in like a political job in the future to start on the state level. He said that he felt like he got a lot more done when he was a state representative as opposed to when he's working in DC, which I was really surprised by because you kind of like Congress is like the pinnacle of politics, if that makes sense. But just with how polarized everything is there, I think it's hard to get a lot of stuff done. And I really liked talking to representatives like Moskowitz who gave direct answers like that and were really talking to youth voters as opposed to talking to some other like senators or representatives that were kind of putting up a smile for the cameras that were like around us. And I don't know, you could tell.
Definitely. I think there is a lot that's humanizing about going in and actually speaking to a human being instead of seeing all like the propaganda, whether
For
that's on
sure.
social media or just around your town. And I mean, I think part of the issue with the national and state divide is I also experience that in my own communities. I see that a lot of times as you get higher up, as you get into these bigger bills that are affecting more people, it's just so hard to get people to agree. And a lot of times I think it also devolves into just a lot of financial issues. What I was surprised to find out was that when I was talking to the chief of staff and representatives from my state, that a lot of these policies are really just dependent on money. And I think specifically when I was talking with Massey, who is from my region, he was talking about how it was like the national defense spending, and I actually got to go into the room and hear as they were debating that. So that was like an amazing experience. But yeah, I
It's so
agree how,
interesting.
yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, I think it was just an overall great experience. And I mean, I recommend it to anyone who has the chance to stop by in DC. And I think we got lucky that they were in town because, at least for me, when I was trying to schedule them, a lot of them said that it was a fly-in day, at least for the senators, I think. Was that the
Yeah.
same for you?
I think yeah, and even for some representatives too, because my representative was flying in that day too, so I had no idea about their schedules like that. But yeah, I recommend it to anyone just because it is really hard to connect with people online. I feel like their emails are probably flooded and stuff like that, but once you have their time and attention in person, it's so much easier to have a conversation.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And during that week also, we had a lot of different group discussions. And did your opinions change at all during those discussions? Because I know we did a lot of readings and a lot of these big, broad questions that perhaps don't have easy answers and they aren't able to sway people one way or another since they're just so hard to answer. So, did you feel that you changed in any way from those discussions?
I think that definitely with our philosophical discussions, like what's the difference between a good person and a good citizen, and those different abstract political ideas, I kind of gained an opinion that I hadn't even had before. Like I just didn't really contemplate those big questions. But I think that it's important that we do contemplate those questions because it kind of gives us a framework of how we need to act in our own communities and stuff like that. But I think in terms of political issues, I think it just crystallized my own beliefs, but also made me compassionate for others because everyone in our fellowship, it was a very diverse group in terms of ethnicity, geography, experience, intellectual diversity. There was so much there that none of our conversations were pro and con. There was so many nuanced factors to consider when we were debating, and I just realized that if I didn't know something about a certain issue, I could sit back and everyone was so intelligent around us that I could just gain an entirely new understanding of certain issues. And on issues that I was passionate with, I could kind of like offer that to other people as well.
I cannot agree more. I think it was really transformational in the way that I wasn't necessarily being swayed one way or another. I think I agree with you how it kind of just solidified more of my own opinions, but I also grew more empathetic and understanding of what other people were thinking because, of course, they were from completely different areas of the US, so they're going to have different concerns. And I think just sitting down and deconstructing those things was really helpful. Not only for like school and going back into school this year for like my gov classes, but also just for thinking about how I'm staying engaged myself because I learned a lot about other ways that I can keep myself up to date and keep myself educated, which I think is really important and every young person should do. So I
Yeah,
think it
and
was
I
really
think
helpful. Yeah,
I think everyone is in their own little bubble in their communities, whether it's like a rural bubble or an urban bubble. I think you're kind of convinced that this is the reality of the United States, and anyone who disagrees with you is wrong because they're not living your life. But being in this place where people are from so many different backgrounds, you kind of understand why they think the way they do, and you just become more like compassionate of and appreciative of how diverse the American populace is.
for sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And do you think that conversations such as those can be beneficial for other students? Because I think we had a very unique group in that everyone there was at least interested in politics and, I mean, had taken courses related to it before. Do you think that other students who perhaps don't have that background or experience are able to get that benefit or have those important discussions?
Yeah, I think definitely. I think everything that we talk about, it's not something that needs this immense background to know. We're talking about hot topic issues that affect the average citizen, and I think we almost need to deconstruct the stigma that to be politically engaged, you have to do so many different things and be part of so many different organizations. But if anything, you just have to educate yourself and have the initiative to and having the initiative to even sign up for something like this. It was such an amazing experience. Yeah.
Truly, it truly was. And yeah, I agree with that sentiment on how it's not really this whole thing that is cracked up to be where you need to be reading something every day. Like I for sure don't read as much as I should, but I didn't feel that I was at a loss of knowledge at any point in there, even though I'm sure there were more educated people than me. So I agree on how any student, as long as they're willing to go and put themselves out there, is able to engage and gain some benefit from that.
Yeah, for
And
sure.
yeah, so at the end of the day, as you're starting your senior year of speech and debate, if you could sum up your entire public speaking and civics journey in one word or phrase, what would that be?
My one word would be perspective. I think I kind of hashed it out a lot during this interview that you just gain a new sense of perspective as you learn more about civics, as you take the initiative to get involved politically. You realize that not everything is black and white and pro and con like it is in debate sometimes. There are so many nuances to really every issue that you gain a sense of perspective.
So, so true. And I really like how you boiled that down to one word. I know for other people it can be really hard to even think of a phrase sometimes. So I like that idea of having perspective. I think that's really powerful. So yeah, thank you for talking with me today on this. It was really great to hear your ideas on not only speech and debate, but also current events.
Yeah, I know. Thanks for having me. That was very interesting.
Thanks for listening to this episode. If you have any comments, questions, or emotional outbursts, feel free to follow the SpeakOut campaign on Instagram at speakout_speech and our website, speakoutspeech.org. See you in the next episode.